Our next speaker is a colleague of Jeff, Ms. Rushanara Ali. She's the Associate Director of the Young Foundation. Like Jeff, Rushanara has a lot of rich experience. She has worked in the Home Office and the Foreign and Commonwealth Office and the Institute for Public Policy Research as well. And congratulations to Rushanara. She has just been elected a MP in the recent general election, and I'm sure she will do a lot and more in the area of propelling social innovation in her area. She will share with us a very practical case study on how they use innovation to cut youth crime in Tau Hannes area. Can we invite Rushanara, please?
Thank you very much. It's a great privilege to be here. And one of the first tasks for me, having got elected recently, is to redefine the job of a politician into being more of a social entrepreneur. Not least because I do passionately believe that the relationship between politics and social entrepreneurship is critical. I'm going to start off. Jeff's talked a lot about the principles and the theories behind social innovation, as well as the how to build up the evidence base and the different ways in which you can enable it to happen. And I wanted to start off by highlighting actually 3 case studies. But before I start, I wanted to just get a show of hands of the different sectors you all belong to. How many of you, hands up if you belong to the public sector or government? Okay, so quite a lot of you. How many of you from corporates with money? So we've got big government, money. What about social entrepreneurs? How many of you here are social entrepreneurs? A few, okay. So by the time I finish, I hope that those of you who are in government and business will feel like social entrepreneurs, and those who are social entrepreneurs will feel like you've got some power and influence somehow, maybe by talking to each other. So the first case study, actually, I'll just mention a few of the examples. Jeff's touched on the Open University, which is the biggest one that was established by Michael Young during his lifetime. I was involved with another project, which I will tell you about, called Language Line, which I helped to develop and start up with Michael Young and his colleagues. Other projects that the Young Foundation subsequently has been involved with starting up include the Studio Schools model, which is a new form of schools, the first one to be launched later this year, and also a project called the Uprising Leadership Programme. In case you're wondering, we haven't started an uprising in the UK yet. There's plenty of time for that if the new government doesn't behave itself. But at the moment, it has the support of the patronage of the former Prime Minister, and it received the backing of the now new Prime Minister, David Cameron, and his deputy, Nick Clegg. I like to think of myself a bit as being able to foresee some outcomes, but never did I think a project that had the backing of these 3 leaders would end up in the current happy state of affairs. So there are some benefits to coalition governments. The other thing Jeff mentioned is the Social Innovation Exchange, but what he forgot to mention is that actually it's a project that was inspired by China after the 2006 International Social Innovation Exchange, where we had a flood of activity and interest in following that conference up with a lasting legacy of bringing networks together from all over the world to share ideas, practical tools, and insights into how to make things happen, how to develop new projects, how to scale them up, how to really make them make a lasting impact through practical action, through projects in education, in health, and other fields. And I hope that the Global Academy idea, which is an offshoot of the Social Innovation Exchange, will have a strong root and base in Hong Kong, in Beijing, and elsewhere. So on to the case studies. The first one is Language Line, which was established in the late 80s. And going back to Jeff's point about prompts, proposals, prototypes, I would say the first and the most important thing in all of this is prompts. For me, prompts means everyday observation, insights. It's noticing the things that go on around us. And Language Line very much began with a prompt, with an insight, everyday observation by the founder, Michael Young, who noticed when he was going into a local hospital that many people in the East End of London were having trouble communicating with their doctors, the nurses, the frontline workers, when they were trying to explain that they had a problem. In some cases, these were emergencies, life-threatening events. And yet, at that time, some people were there. You know, London's a very diverse city, as you know. Some people were there from Bosnia, having recently fled the war there. Others from Asia, Africa. Others were tourists who were visiting, who had language barriers. And what we found was that there wasn't an efficient way of reaching people immediately, especially in cases of emergencies. So there were some face-to-face interpreters available in some languages, but you could never have a good, there was never an appropriate fit in time-critical situations. So that led us to develop a telephone interpreting company. At the time, there wasn't anything like it. To help hospitals, to help police services and others, emergency services in particular, in the public services, to respond to a diverse, multilingual London where people not everybody had English. It started off as a charity with some support, very small amounts of money from the Home Office. So government backing, £5,000 from the Home Office and around £5,000 from the local police station, which was next door. And I mentioned the next door point is because there wasn't a financing mechanism. It was very much knocking on the door of the police saying, do you fancy backing this project? And it did require a leap of faith by public officials to take forward what was an everyday observation and a hunch and an idea and try and contribute and see what happens and experiment. And if you haven't got my hint yet, if you're the public sector participant in the room, then it's there. So this is the model. This is how it looks. Just at its basic, it started with the use of taking advantage of telephone as a form of technology to reach people. So you had a small call center, and the interpreter was based at home, working on a freelance basis. Quite often they were unemployed, who we trained up to become professional interpreters. Some of them were asylum seekers who didn't have much work. Some of them were mums who were looking after their children and wanted part-time work, freelance, being at home. And then you had your doctor and your patient. That's the example for the health service. And this may look like a very professional description of what it looked like at the time, but actually when it started, the call center was in the basement of our office, and the interpreter was obviously based at home, and the doctor physically just passed on the phone, very, very old-fashioned way of, to the patient. There wasn't even a proper speakerphone in some places. And again, so it started off as not a slick operation, but it had huge potential. But if somebody came in to evaluate the project at the time, within the year, in the first 5 years, they'd probably deem it a failure and wouldn't back it, wouldn't support it. And indeed, some people did do that. Some people said, well, I'm not convinced, and didn't back it, didn't fund it. But what did later happen, as you can see from the numbers, 750,000 people were being served at one point, and that's grown dramatically over the years. And it was later sold off, having had private backing to expand it, to scale it in 2000 and then 2006 at about 25 million. And now it's a multi-million-pound operation, but a private sector model. So it started off at its birth as a charity, shoestring budgets, then with the input of the private sector, as well as backing from government through other public services, through direct contracts across the public services, it was able to grow and be scaled up. And that's where I think the example highlights the importance of government and the private sector in enabling a small project that has potential to grow and have systemic impact and change the face of, in the UK, of public services altogether. So this service is now integrated across the police service, the health service, housing services, pretty much every major service that requires interpreting facilities on an immediate basis. And it provides over 100 languages within 1 minute. So you can almost certainly guarantee that you will get the language you need within a minute, which you can imagine is vital. And there are well-documented examples of lives being saved as a result of this service. And of course, money being saved, because you could never provide 100 languages face-to-face within one institution. It would cost a fortune. The second example I want to highlight is another project I was involved with. Again, I was involved with starting this up with Michael Young. At the time, I was 18 years old, 19 actually. I was looking for a summer job. I was quite bored myself. I'd just left university after my first year. And I'd stumbled into Michael Young the year before through the previous project he'd set up. And I asked him if he had a summer job, because I needed to earn some money so that I could go on holiday. Little did I know that it was going to lead me to what became a really exciting project. So he introduced me to another young person who was about 18, who couldn't have been more different from me. He went to a public school. He turned up in a tweed jacket. He was really posh, and I later discovered he was the son of the former Chancellor of the Exchequer. And I couldn't believe that somebody would like that. I grew up in the East End of London, and at the time it was in a really difficult situation. Lots of urban conflict, lots of problems, lots of poverty. Things have improved a lot since then, I couldn't believe somebody like that would really hang out in the East End of London. But anyway, so he sent us off to talk to lots of young people. He wanted to know what young people felt about the area. And he wanted to know that through the experience of other young people. He didn't want to go around and talk to young people himself. At that time, he was in his 70s, so you can understand why he wouldn't. But he wanted to know the insights that we could get, and it was clear that he felt we could reach young people in a way that older people couldn't, or people who were even a few years older couldn't. And following on from these inquiries and questions, what we discovered was where some of the frustrations were among young people. And this was in the early 90s. This is 1993, when in the East End of London, where the Young Foundation's based, where I grew up, there were huge tensions between different groups. And it culminated in, I don't want to present a bleak picture, that was a very long time ago. It culminated in the far right getting a seat in a local election. The British National Party, which is a racist party that won a seat in what is a diverse area. And also lots of tension between youngsters, from white youngsters as well as Asian youngsters. So the idea was to look at how to bring them together from different backgrounds through practical learning and exciting opportunities where they could come together, and where those barriers and conflicts could be reduced. So following on from the research, we established a project called Tower Hamlets Summer University. It's now called Futureversity, a name that the young people recently gave the project. And as I mentioned, it tried to combine that everyday encounter, research, inquiry, observation, with practice and with a strong influence of young people to shape the projects and say what they wanted. And what they had said to us is, we want to do things that are fun and exciting and interesting during our summer holidays. Many of them couldn't afford to go on holiday during the summer period, and often got into trouble with the police just by being around in the streets in groups, and felt it was unfair, and they were bored and frustrated, and occasionally were getting into low-level crime. But on the whole, they were not getting up to too much mischief, but were seen that way, viewed with suspicion. And the purpose of this project was to try and give them meaningful, interesting activity to help raise their aspirations, but also channel their talents and develop their skills, both in the formal educational sense, but also practical skills. In 2000, by the time we got to 2009, we have huge, as you can see, huge amounts of demand. Some nearly 9,000 applications for 2,000 places. So, and it's been going up year on year. The project is now spread across London and is now going national. And in terms of just to give you some numbers, youth crime has gone down dramatically since the project was established. So you've got a reduction in juvenile nuisance by 17%, drug offences by 25%, overall youth crime rate down by about 8%, and lots of awards won by the project. And they're particularly proud, the young people are particularly proud of the fact that the project produced a major pop star as well. And the reason why that particular example is an exciting one for the charity, but also for the young people, is because the person concerned came from a school where he nearly got excluded. And his teacher found this project and put him in touch with the organisers, because he could see musical potential. And the courses that are offered include music, projects in the media, languages, a whole range of different courses that are of interest, that will be of interest to young people. In his case, it was music, and he was able to channel. They were able to channel his talents, and this is what gave him his first break and led him to stardom. And others have won prizes in filmmaking and so on. Just a kind of quick illustration of some of the projects I mentioned, some of the courses in photography, in languages. They also have their own magazine, which involves interviewing high-profile figures, including interviews with the current Prime Minister when he was, as they say, a nobody. So they take credit for discovering him. And this is just a quote from some of the young people. It is much better for the youth to get off the streets and do something creative and constructive. Everyone has the potential and the talent. You just have to find it. And I do passionately believe that, because many of the young people, they come from very different backgrounds. Some are at university, others are going on to university, others have never really done very well in education, but this gives them an opportunity to thrive. And then that helps with their education as well, has often helped with their education. In other cases, they're developing practical skills. Some are referred to the organisation by their schools or because they're getting into trouble. So a real social mix. It's deliberately trying to mix people up, not to try and target a particularly needy group, because the social integration is very much, social as well as ethnic and racial integration is very much at the core of the project. And this just gives you a list of some of the kinds of roles they've learned to play through these courses. And having exposure to investment bankers and opportunities in the banking world. The project is funded by the private sector as well as government and foundations. The urban musician I mentioned already, taster courses in teaching, journalism, and many others. Learning how to drive. I came across a student during my campaign, actually, who said, why don't you tell them more about what you did for Summer University? You might win some votes then. And I said, well, that's a charity I set up. It's quite separate from my political role. And he said, did you know that, I just wanted to let you know that I actually learned how to drive because of Summer University. And I was very glad he learned to drive because I still can't drive. So some very practical skills that they taught and continue to teach. The ambition is to try and scale this and expand it to a national level. Other areas are beginning to copy it. Lots of cities are beginning to copy the model. But in the current financial climate, it's certainly, without a doubt, a challenge. But I'm optimistic, as ever, that because of the demand, because of the interest, because of the need, it would be madness for the government and other foundations to reduce funding. I guess the next challenge for me will be to try and persuade all those big banks who are giving out billions of pounds in bonuses to donate some of it to projects like this. The final project I wanted to mention very quickly is actually the last one. I guess the point to make about what kind of model it is. It's a charitable model. Futureversity is a charity. The one before that started as a charity and became a company. This one is a startup at the moment, so I have no idea what kind of model it'll be. It's very much at that early stage, discovery stage. We're going to have to suck it and see and work out whether it makes sense to be a charity or whether it should be a social enterprise or a for-profit. So Fastlaners, again, started off with everyday insights. Observations of seeing large numbers of graduates who were finding it very difficult to get jobs in the East End of London. You can see a running theme. I don't get beyond East London very often, so it's a great pleasure to be here. I think, and in a way, the reason why the East End of London does give you so many of these ideas is partly because of the social challenges there. And even before the recession kicked in, what we found was so many graduates who were struggling to get jobs. And it seemed perverse, given that the area, Tower Hamlets Borough, where the Young Foundation is based, is in the middle between Canary Wharf and the City of London, some of the richest square miles on the planet, with all this opportunity. So I couldn't understand why this was happening. And I did, if truth be told, get perpetually frustrated every time I went to a bank or to government. When I went to the government departments and said, why are you not doing anything about graduates? They said, well, graduates don't need help. They usually get jobs. So then I tried to find some evidence to show that 1/3 of graduates struggle to get jobs, whatever the economic situation. And they came back and said, yeah, but they usually get jobs. Then I went to the corporates. It took 2 years before anything happened. Maybe longer, 3 years, 2.5 years. Then I went to the corporates and they said, well, they're not going to the right universities. I've had so many, actually, corporates saying, well, they're not going to, their horizons are not wide enough. So I said, where do you advertise for your jobs? Where do you go and recruit? Well, we go to the Oxbridges and the Russell Group universities. I said, I see, okay. Well, how many people from here go to Oxbridge? You must know that most people, now I've got nothing against people who went to public schools or private schools, but you must know that 50% of the people who go to Oxbridge are from private schools, and not a single one of these kids will have been to, a handful of them would have gone to Oxbridge. So have you considered recruiting locally? Well, yeah, we're interested. We are interested. So, but we're just not getting the applications. So you have lots and lots of excuses. So then I asked them the big question: will you fund a pilot project, perhaps? And there was lots of umming and ahhing. So I kind of gave up for a while. And then decided to find friends who worked in corporates, because I thought, well, that might be a good way into the corporates, so that we can persuade them. Once the people who work in those institutions say that there is a need, there is a problem, and actually corporates can play a really key role in helping them to helping us to address this challenge of getting really talented people who get the degrees, do everything that the system encourages them to do, play by the books, come out with the right degrees, go to, okay, they didn't go to Oxbridge. Some of them did, actually. I discovered a young Somali graduate who had been to Cambridge, and he was still struggling to get jobs. So we decided to pilot this project with small amounts of money from a foundation, initially working with about 15 people, just to test out, to see if the project would work. And the idea behind the project, this is just an example of last October, actually, before I go on to what the project is. At the end of last year, there was a careers fair in Canary Wharf, hosted by Canary Wharf Group, for just over 1,000 people. And about 10,000 turned up. So you can imagine the demand. And if the system was dealing with the need, then there wouldn't be. And a sizable number were graduates. And some of them were doing jobs that they were doing as students, and they wanted graduate level jobs. They wanted to step up. And these are the kinds of some of the barriers that they experience and they face. So misconceptions, their own misconceptions about the labour market. So they don't necessarily understand, when you're leaving university, it's presumed that you know everything there is to know about the labour market. They don't necessarily understand enough about the labour market, whether it's finance, media, government, wherever you may want to get into. And if you come from particular backgrounds, if you come from less privileged backgrounds, you have less connections, social connections, less social capital. So your, university has is a bit of an equalizer. Everyone at university, on the face of it, is similar to you. As soon as you leave, those inequalities start to kick back in, certainly in the UK. And experiences of discrimination in some cases, and also in some cases the lack of social and non-cognitive skills. So the purpose of the project was to try and provide a crash course, an intensive, I call it a finishing school, but it's a play on the inverse of the traditional finishing school. So it's for people who are less privileged, to give them a leg up in terms of enabling them to get into the labour market, navigate their way through the labour market, and help them with the kinds of skills that universities tend not to teach. So universities are good at teaching the hard skills, getting you the degree, and so on, but not necessarily the kind of work-life skills that employers are looking for, whether it's how to be friendly to your customers, how to speak, how to dress, how to work in teams, and so on. All the things that we all look for, depending on the industries we're working on, and people are expected to know how to do. So this course is very much designed. It was launched, the initial pilot was done 2 years ago. It took another 2 years to raise enough funding and get government backing as well as corporate backing to start up in sizable numbers. And this week we launched the first of 3 courses with young people, with graduates from the area, but also reaching out to other areas as well. And it now has the support of the Canary Wharf Group, which is the main property developer, as well as the Department for Business Innovation and Skills. Sorry, yes, biz. As well as a couple of other corporates. And what's critical about this project is it has the backing of employers. Employers know what they're looking for when they're recruiting people, and it's really important to ensure that they have exposure to the graduates who are coming through in a non-threatening environment. During the 2 weeks, the purpose is for employers to be able to give really constructive feedback, but tough feedback, to those who are coming through, who are doing the training, ranging from how they speak, how they conduct themselves, how well they do their research before they go into an interview, how they dress, how they use their body language, what kind of messages, subliminal messages they're getting across to people, and so on and so forth. So all the tacit knowledge that many graduates are expected to have, but are often may not, depending on their social backgrounds or cultural backgrounds, to try and address those and confront those. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with The Apprentice. Do you watch The Apprentice? Anyone? Yeah. So it's there's a little bit of a play on The Apprentice, although Alan Sugar is not participating yet. A play on The Apprentice, meets kind of something much more serious. And it's very much about making sure that the graduates who are going through in a short period of time can learn the skills and forge the connections and develop the social support that they need, both among each other but also with employers, in order to get through what inevitably is a really difficult period in life when they've left university. Everyone expects them to do well, especially if they've come from backgrounds where they've had to pay their way through university. And there'll be lots of people who will have been skeptical about whether they should bother with university because it's expensive, and huge amounts of expectation on them. And then they have to make their way in the world and prove that it was worth it, and find their feet and find a meaningful profession to get into. And in this economic climate, as you can imagine, it's ever increasingly difficult. So this is an attempt to try and address that gap. And I just want to conclude by saying this project, which is in kind of fairly embryonic form, we hope will be spread across different cities in the UK. I don't know about other countries, but certainly in the UK, there's still a huge amount of social inequality, even when you leave university, even when you've got the same degree as someone of a different, more privileged social background. So it's an attempt to address that, but also to avoid a waste of talent among people who are very highly educated. Thank you very much.